Hey guys, we're nearing the end of our novel that we've been reading throughout this year, so I thought one way that we could continue to power through would be to upload a read aloud so that you guys could see the book and hear my voice, and that way we can wrap up this novel that you guys have been working so hard on. Chapter 24 we just finished. If you remember, that's when they went to the holiday dance, John and Violet. And chapter 24 closed with them deciding the dance was over and they needed to go home. So now we are at chapter 25, and the title is Gotcha. Who are this young couple that walk together up No View Alley, hand in hand, completely unmindful of the whooshing wind and the flocculent snow? They appear to be old friends or perhaps new lovers. Interestingly enough, in the Lhasa-Palulu language, the two terms are rather similar. Newly fallen snow lies several inches deep on the rooftops and sidewalks and lawns, a glistening and pristine white carpet that muffles their footsteps and turns their conversation to whispers, so that it's hard to tell what they're talking about. I am quite sure they are speaking utter nonsense to each other, but they appear to be having a very good time. They reach a house that looks like it needs to lean against the houses on either side of it for support against the wind. "Why don't you come in?" Violent Haze offers. "I'm sure my parents have gone to bed by now." "We could have some hot cider and watch TV in the basement," Violent Haze. Your eyes are gleaming in the moonlight. The young fellow is tempted, but he has learned a thing or two in his brief life that is not a life. "I would love to," he says, "but it's late, and as you said yourself, it would be rather hard for the evening to have been more fun. So let's say goodbye now." "Okay," she says. "Okay." She hesitates. The moon discreetly hides its face behind some clouds. "John, will you kiss me goodnight?" I'm not sure it's a good idea. I try to warn her. I'm a notorious nose-biter, a lip nipper, and perhaps even a tongue chewer. "It's a good idea," she says, closing her eyes and moving her head forward. "Violent Haze, is this a kiss?" It feels so warm and soft. I did not know that kisses came in this flavor. This is why people like kissing. Now I see. "Good night, Violet. Here's your brother's jacket back." "Good night, John." Who is this young fellow in the shabby shoes and the ragged gray corduroy pants who is floating home from the holiday dance? How is it possible that he can walk home through the newly fallen snow and leave no footprints? It must be a hovercraft pretending to be a 14-year-old boy, and this happy whistling sound must be some open valve releasing steam from the hovercraft. Oddly enough, the steam from the hovercraft seems to be whistling the melody to the tuba solo in The Love Song of the Bullfrog. The boy reaches his block that is not a block, trips on a curb, and falls face first into the newly fallen snow. Okay, so it is me after all. I get up looking like Frosty the Snowman and laugh at my own clumsiness, a jolly happy soul indeed. In fact, I am more than jolly. I believe I'm filled with glee, which is a very dangerous way to be. In fact, if you live in a war zone, there is no more dangerous combination in the world than being slightly drunk on spiked punch, filled with glee, and wearing essence of stupidity as a cologne. I approach my house that is not a house, and I am so filled with glee that I do not conduct the necessary reconnaissance. I just open the front door and start to walk in when a hand reaches out and grabs my right arm in a painful grip. "Gotcha," a voice says, and I smell the whiskey reek of the man who is not my father. No, in fact, this doesn't happen. Just as I did not go down into the basement with Violent Haze and incur the wrath of her mountain gorilla of a father, I do not try to enter my house that is not a house without conducting the necessary reconnaissance. You see, as I mentioned a moment ago, I have learned a few things in my life that is not a life. First, I note that the man who is not my father's truck is not around. This is a very good sign. And then I circle the house, peeking in the windows. The rooms are all dark and the TV's not on. This is another good sign. I walk halfway around the house and see no signs of life. My house that is not a house is quiet, dark, and to all appearances, empty. I reach my backyard, past the apple tree that is actually a gray leaf maple tree, a gray leaf tree, and stomp through the ankle-deep snow to my back porch. I quietly climb the steps, open the door, and slip inside. But as I reach to turn on the light, a hand shoots out of the darkness and grabs my right arm in a painful grip. "Gotcha," a voice says, and I smell the whiskey reek of the man who is not my father. I attempt to pull away, but there is no escape from his grip. "Hello, John. Do you know what time it is?" he asks with mocking politeness. I get the feeling that he's had quite a bit to drink. "After 11, I say, looking around for someone to shout to for help or for an escape route or even for a weapon. But we are all alone at the back of my dark house that is not a house. "Any idea what I had for dinner?" he asks. If I do shout, I believe the fallen snow will muffle my cry for help, and I know I will not get a second chance. "No," I say, I don't know what you had for dinner." "Nothing," the man who is not my father says with a laugh, and then his grip on my wrist grows tighter and yet tighter. "Nothing at all." "Well, there's food in the fridge. You could have cooked something for yourself." I break off then as my wrist is twisted almost completely around. "You give me lip, you're going to make it worse for yourself. Where have you been all night?" "At a dance," I gasp. "Yeah, right. As if someone would want to dance with you. I'll teach you to mind me, and I'll make you dance." And he begins to drag me along the hallway towards the door to the basement. I have a sudden, very vivid flashback from our last visit to the basement, and I feel his thick leather belt lashing my back and shoulders as I try to ward off blows to my face. My body recoils from the memory, and I yank away from him, and somehow I loosen his grip on my wrist, and then his hand is gone completely. I'm free. "Flee," the little man who sits at the control switchboard of my brain types into his keyboard at high speed. "Legs churn, arms pump. This is a do-or-die moment. Get going." But my freedom is an illusion. I did not break the man who is not my father's hold. He's merely shifting his grip on my wrist to a much more painful one. His right hand darts forward, and before I can flee, I am lifted clear off the ground by my hair. I cry out in pain, and my feet kick thin air. I don't know if you've ever been suspended by your hair with every ounce of your weight contributing to your agony. It's excruciating. I am being scalped by the force of gravity. The man who is not my father takes a step toward the basement and then another step. We are right near the door to the basement stairs. "Dancing, huh? I'll teach you to mind me," he says again. Even in my agony, the stench of the whiskey breath is sickening. He's quite drunk. I hear a sudden growl, and then I'm released from his grip so suddenly that I fall heavily to the floor. I see that my loyal dog Sprocket has bitten the man who is not my father's leg, and is still in the act of chewing on it. The man who is not my father tries to kick Sprocket away, and when this fails, he reaches down, picks Sprocket up by a hind leg, and hurls him into a wall. Sprocket lands in a heap and makes a terrible whimpering sound, and I fear he will not be able to come to my defense again. But he has gained me a few valuable seconds. This time, I do flee. I dodge from my distracted tormentor and make a dash for the front door. "Stop!" the man who is not my father calls. "Stop now, or by God you'll regret it." I hear him coming after me. I believe he's limping. Sprocket has done some damage. And suddenly I find myself playing the doomed victim in one of those B-horror movies where the teenager is chased around his own house by a limping murderous monster. Surely you would think I could outrun a man whose leg has just been gnawed on by a dog, but I appear to be running through our house in slow motion. The man who is not my father's coming after me, cursing wildly and gaining with each step. I reach the front door. It's locked. My fingers fumble with the latches and bolts, and there, finally, the door flies open. The man who is not my father grabs me from behind. He spins me around. Whop! The blow with his open hand catches me on the top of the head and makes my vision blur and my ears ring. But I have a surprise for him. I've come up with a weapon. Unfortunately, it's not a knife or a gun. It is, in fact, the keepsake pin disguised as a candy cane that I was given as a door prize at the holiday dance. Without even thinking what I'm doing, I raise it and slash at his face. I aim for an eye, but I believe that in the darkness I miss. I can feel it sink into the soft flesh of his cheek. The man who is not my father's hands go up to his face. Even in the darkness of our front hall, I can see that I have drawn blood. It is said that bullies become frightened or squeamish when they are made to feel pain themselves or when their own blood is drawn. Don't believe it. The man who is not my father has an opposite reaction. He becomes so enraged that he loses all control. He utters a loud roar and strikes out at me with a closed fist. Ba-bam! I have never been punched by a grown man's closed fist before. The impact lifts me off my feet. The good news is that he launches me in the direction I wanted to go. I fly out the door and land on our front porch. The bad news is that I taste my own broken teeth and bits of bloody lip. I do not have time to conduct a more extensive inventory of damage because the man who is not my father is coming out after me. There's no escape. He's faster than I am. I can't possibly defeat him in a fight. He's far stronger than I am, nor can I outfox him. He's craftier and meaner than I am, and I believe he has decades of experience in all manner of fights and brawls. Unfortunately, I have no other options. Among the Lhasa-Palulu, that tribe that is not a tribe, there is a saying that roughly parallels the English expression, "I will fight you to the last drop of my blood." It is used only in situations of complete hopelessness, when a cruel enemy will not negotiate, and when even a divine intervention such as an eclipse is not a possibility. Now, some might say that continuing to struggle against an overpowering enemy is an act of foolishness that can only increase and prolong pain. Some might suggest begging for mercy or curling up in a fetal position, shutting your eyes and accepting your fate. But the Lhasa-Palulu believe that if you are truly cornered by a merciless enemy and all hope of flight or being saved vanishes, you might as well go out bravely and with an act of noble defiance. Let me also add here that I am still wearing Essence of Stupidity as a cologne, which is not a bad thing if one needs to commit an act of noble defiance. Also, I am still perhaps slightly drunk from holiday dance punch. And lastly, a very nice girl was heard to remark earlier this evening that I am the best boy in my school, and crazy as that claim was, her words and her tone have stayed with me. Instead of running away, I stepped forward to meet the charge of the man who is not my father, trying for another slash at his face. He didn't expect me to come forward. Kapow! Our bodies collide awkwardly, and the force of his greater momentum carries us both down the stone steps of my front porch. Bam, 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 into the falling snow. The fall separates us, and we get to our feet at about the same time. He roars deep in his throat, a low, enraged animal sound of pure menace. I scream back at him at the top of my lungs. I don't scream words, I scream hate. As he comes for me, I don't run away from him, but rather I run to meet him, trying to knock him off his feet. I windmill my arms crazily at him, and I feel my right fist connect with what I hope is his face. But the man who is not my father also connects with a punch, and his blow knocks me flat on my back, and all the air vanishes from my lungs. I try to roll over to stand back up, but it's impossible to move without any air in your lungs. And suddenly he's pinning me down with his weight and choking me with both hands around my neck. I can't get him off me. I kick at his back. I claw at him feebly, but it is no use. He is a man, and I'm a 14-year-old boy. I see his fist draw back and then come forward. It looks as big and heavy as a wrecking ball. Ba-bam! The punch breaks my nose. I can actually hear the bones crunch. He's killing me. The good news is that it doesn't hurt as much as you might think to be killed by someone you hate. if you go down fighting. I'm still kicking at him and fighting back, but so much of my blood is now in my face that I can't really see anything. Then I hear an unexpected voice. "Get off him, you villain! Off, I say!" Someone is trying to pull the man who is not my father off me. The tiny corner of my brain that is still able to function identifies it as Mr. Steenwilly's voice. "Get off him!" Mr. Steenwilly shouts again. "I called the police. They're on their way. Get off him!" I believe that the man who is not my father attacks Mr. Steenwilly. There's much shouting, and the sounds of blows being struck, but I am no longer sure exactly what's happening around me. I hear the long, twisting wail of a police car's siren heading up the block towards us. I sink deeper and deeper into that swirl of sound, and the dark, cold night closes over me.